In the underwater world of the largemouth bass, the first and last words are always cover and structure. Weeds provide both. When you peek below the surface of the Hudson, you'll find eelgrass. It's one of two varieties of subsurface weed that we're going to focus on. It's good stuff. This is coontail. It's great stuff. And this is the setup as we go work in the weeds. We're filming here about 5 hours into a falling tide. It's almost at its lowest point, and you can see the vegetation right at the surface. We've started with a spinnerbait in a huge, mostly eelgrass bed with occasional clumps of coontail, which means we choose a spinnerbait with a willow leaf blade.
The reason for that is that a willow leaf blade spins a lot closer to the shaft than any of the other blades, a Colorado or an Indiana. And since it's not as wide out from the center of the bait, you can work it right through the thickest weeds. That spinnerbait also has got a number 5 gold willow leaf blade. Now, it's real gold plate on that blade. And in this murky water, that seems to make quite a bit of difference. We've been throwing gold blades pretty much all this year. And they've been out fishing any other color about 3 to 1.
Of course, if the bass aren't here, we move. There. Gold willow leaf spinnerbait and all. Like I said, eelgrass is good, but if you find the 3-dimensional cover provided by coontail or milfoil, that is great stuff.
We're fishing a weed flat, and you've got nice growth of good green coontail where the water's a little deeper, and it shallows up just a little bit, and there's some eelgrass. And the bass on this falling tide should be just on the edge where the eelgrass and the coontail meet, right on that break line.
That's why we work the weeds. And there's miles and miles of these underwater greenhouses for us to fish. You see, the Hudson's chock full of small bays and large bays both, and weedy mudflats located out of the main river current. And the fish are there, on the edges, in cuts, and on weed points, feeding on bait fish and spinnerbaits. Going! Oh gosh, this guy's right in the weeds. Got him. Oh, jeez. Wow. Oh, I like Hudson River bassing. I think you will too. What can you say about a fish like this, huh, Mike? That's some kind of fish. Catching weed flat bass can be pretty exciting. Wow. Finding them involves understanding how Hudson weed beds are structured. Pick a typical submergent weed flat, and let's dissect it. First, because it's everywhere, there's eelgrass. There's the coontail or milfoil, and a few other varieties too. In our textbook weed bed, eelgrass, a thin ribbon-like plant, grows in the shallowest water. All it needs is a couple of inches at low tide, where it forms a canopy. Coontail will be a bit deeper, about 2 to 5 feet at low tide. These depths will vary according to how off-color the river happens to be running in any particular year. What we see then in this overhead view of our idealized weed bed is a distinct tier structure, layers that provide us and the bass with various break lines or edges. For example, here. And here. Next on this idealized weed bed, with a classic weed line, near a deep water channel, we can add something different. A break on the edge. Say a cut, a hole, a point, or heck, let's be adventurous, and say a fallen tree to break the current and provide a feeding station. Then we position the boat facing into the current, in this case on a falling tide, and it is one super bassin situation. The ideal bait in this situation, where we can expect active fish in shallow water, is a buzzbait. Because you can retrieve it slower, a plastic triple wing buzzbait is choice number 1 on the Hudson. So we've got the right bait, we've got wood on a weed line. It creates the perfect situation. Well, it creates that in my mind. Let's see if it creates that in the fish's mind. Got one, got one, got one! Aha! Nice fish. Another one. Woo!
Some people say I get too excited when I catch a fish. Not me. I'm thrilled to death every time I catch a bass. That's about 2 pounds.
And the excitement can be contagious to the fish. And if you're in the right place at the right time, that just seems like easy pickings.
Got one. Good one. Try to get him on the surface. Ah! Nice. That's a good one.
Like I said, sometimes it's easy pickings. Other times you'd swear the bass put on their shades. They become inactive. And so we slow down our presentation. We flip. I've rigged up a 5-inch paddle-tail worm that Gambler makes over in Florida. Mike's got a 7-inch curly tail. And the details.
What we've got here is a shallow weed flat.
Yeah.
It's clumps of milfoil and coontail. And a good way to fish this is to just pitch or flip a worm right to the clumps. Now, this pattern works not only on big weedy flats, but also on narrow bands of weed.
We're at dead low tide here, and the only current is caused by the brisk wind. And we're flipping into those shallow weeds, looking for fish that are holding tight to individual weed clumps. And we flip, and we flip, and we flip into as little as 12 inches of water. So, when you do get a hit...
Oh, that's the way to get him out. Whoa, good one.
Good fish.
Look at the size of that mouth. Look at the size of that mouth.
Nice fish.
Now, you got him out of there just the way you're supposed to get him out of the weeds. You hooked him and snagged him. Now, what happens...
Pull him right out.
What happens if somebody doesn't do that?
You'll get tied up in these weeds, and if you're not using heavy line, you'll lose the fish.
But you know something? You never really lose on the Hudson. Especially when you spend the day working the weeds.